It was the fall of 1974, a few weeks into my freshman year at high school in California. I had just started to get my bearings in a sea of unfamiliar faces and new routines. Homeroom had become a predictable space for me, where we'd quietly chat with friends, do a little homework, or just sit in silence as the clock slowly ticked toward the bell. That morning was different. There was an air of uncertainty, a low hum of anxiety that seemed to travel through the room even before our teacher, Mrs. Peterson, said anything. She had always been calm, measured, and cool, but today her eyes had a hint of something else, maybe disbelief, or perhaps resignation. I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but there was a shift, a feeling that something monumental was about to happen. Mrs. Peterson walked to the corner of the room, where the old, bulky television sat on a cart. The kind with the antennas sticking out and a screen that was never quite clear, but still enough to hold your attention. She pushed the cart to the center of the room, her fingers lingering for a moment on the dials of the set. The classroom went silent. Even the usual chatter of friends settling into their seats stopped. There was no explanation at first, just the steady click of buttons, and then the fuzzy black and white image of a man in a suit, President Richard Nixon, appeared on the screen. His face looked tired, drawn, the weight of his office visibly pressing down on him. The words, "From Washington, D.C., flashed across the screen, and I realized that what was unfolding was something that we were seeing in real time, something that wasn't just part of the history books we'd read later. Nixon's voice came through, shaking at times, but resolute. "I have just informed the American people that I have resigned the presidency." Those words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with significance. I could feel the room shift again, this time with something heavier, shock, confusion, maybe even a sense of fear. I wasn't sure what to think. I was barely 14, more concerned with fitting in and getting through the day than with the politics of the world. But this was different. As Nixon spoke about the conduct that had led him to this moment, I could feel the tension in the room rising. There was no escaping the reality of it. The man who had held the highest office in the land, who had been a figure of authority and power, was now publicly confessing to a violation of the very trust that had been placed in him by the American people. This wasn't just some scandal, it was about abuse of power, corruption, and betrayal, as we would learn in the coming months. I could see the expressions of my classmates as they watched in stunned silence, some with wide eyes, others with furrowed brows, trying to process what this meant. In that moment, I realized something crucial. Politics wasn't just an abstract thing that existed outside of my world, it had real consequences for people's lives. The actions of those in power affected everyone, whether you paid attention to it or not. Nixon wasn't just resigning because of a mistake or a bad decision, he was resigning because his actions had fundamentally broken the trust of the American people, and by doing so, had betrayed the very ideals the country was supposed to stand for. As I sat there, the weight of the moment settling in, I found myself grappling with the complexities of politics. It wasn't just about what you believed in, it was about how those beliefs shaped your actions, and how those actions could either help or harm others. I began to understand that leadership was not simply about authority, it was about integrity, responsibility, and accountability. Nixon's resignation wasn't just a moment of political drama, it was a defining moment for my understanding of what was at stake in the political world. It also marked a shift in my own thinking. Prior to that morning, I had never considered myself particularly political. I was too young, too preoccupied with high school to think about such things. But as Nixon's voice faltered and his resignation speech came to a close, I realized I could no longer be passive. The world I lived in, the country I called home, was shaped by the choices of those in power, and those choices mattered. I had to care. I had to pay attention. From that day on, I began to take note of the political landscape, to question what I saw and heard, and to develop a sense of what I believed in. Nixon's resignation taught me the value of holding leaders accountable, of questioning authority, and of never taking the system for granted. It was a lesson in integrity, and in the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter how difficult it might be. Looking back, I can see that moment as the turning point in my own political journey. A simple, surreal event, watching a president resign on a grainy TV screen in a high school classroom, had changed the way I viewed the world. And for the first time, I realized that the act of paying attention, of questioning, of holding power to account, was one of the most important things I could do in life. That day in homeroom, Nixon resigned, but something else was born in me, a commitment to stay engaged, to demand better, and to never stop questioning the decisions of those who hold power. It was the moment that shaped the way I would see politics, not just as a spectator, but as someone who understood that change was possible when you refused to remain silent.